Awesome. Welcome everyone to Ship GTM podcast. We're excited to be back. We've got a special guest today, Elias, who's calling in from Sweden. So we're stoked to have him. Elias, do you want to give maybe a quick intro on yourself to get started?
Sounds fantastic. And guys, thanks so much for having me. Really, really excited. Quick intro for myself. My name is Elias. I am a head of special projects at the Kiln, which is a GTM engineering agency. And on the side, building some open source project for GTM engineering, and a lot of it kind of based around Vercel. Very excited to be chatting with you guys. Big fan of the pod already. Have listened to the episodes. Big fan. So really, really excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for being here. You're being very humble. I think like for those that are tuning in and haven't heard of the Kiln's like the GTM engineering agency. I know like a lot of the history, there's history with Clay, right? Like a lot of people came from Clay who kind of like coined, I feel like initially the term GTM engineer.
It's a genuinely very interesting question at the very least to me, because of like this like term of GTM engineering originating from Clay. So I think the long story short is that I believe at the very least Patrick Spachalski was one of, if not the first, like marketing hire at Clay. And so for anybody that has ever seen like Clay tutorials on YouTube, if there is like a red-haired guy making just like the most cracked tables, that's Patrick. So he's a very recognizable guy, and like he's just like fantastic. I've heard from Matthias, his co-founder, that he does get recognized on the tube in New York, which is pretty dope. Patrick was early at Clay, and so when they started building out, I guess he saw this opportunity where he realized that there is just such a need for the implementation and strategy side. It's like, okay, you have SaaS here, but then there is like this big stretch, maybe especially with a tool like Clay, that kind of like opens up, and it's like number one, it's a blank sheet. Number two, it's a spreadsheet, and people are like, I don't like Excel. What is this? And so like that's kind of like the gut reaction of some people when they see it. It's just like, oh no, like what's going on here? But then, once you get into it, you realize, oh, I can actually do magic in this tool, and I can do very, very valuable things here. So Patrick, I believe, recruited his college, like one of his college best friends, Matthias Powell. They started the Kiln, and so even to this day, still sit at Clay's offices. Definitely, we are one of 4 elite studios for Clay, and we were recently acquired actually by a consulting firm called 2X Marketing. And I believe it was the first GTM engineering agency to be acquired. It's been like I've been with them for 18 months or so. Been an amazing ride. Absolutely love the team. Definitely many fun stories there of like how everything happened.
Yeah, that's way cool. And congrats on the acquisition. That's huge.
Oh,
probably like, I feel like it's been cool probably because you've seen this whole like industry emerge. And I know like you are kind of like very cracked on the engineering side as well. Like I know that you've been working on some open source kind of tooling for GTM engineering. We'd love to hear a little bit about that if you'd be willing to talk to us about it.
Of course. Super fun. So the very, very interesting side for me in terms of GTM engineering is a really interesting term. Like you would expect it to be a lot about engineering, but most of it, as it happens today, is actually kind of like centered around no and low code tools like Clay. And I am personally absolutely not like a gatekeeper saying like, oh, this is terrible that we're letting in all of these non-technical people. Like it's actually absolutely amazing. At the Kiln, some of our absolutely most amazing teammates came in more from the like sales or marketing or business side, like or not even that, like no clear background whatsoever, and then they just I think it's so clear. I'm guessing you've noticed the same thing, that nowadays with AI, it matters almost more who you're like as a person and your
Yeah.
general attitude as a human being, and like almost nothing else comes even close. Because somebody that's maybe started, some people come immediately to mind at the Kiln, like started with no technical background, probably didn't know what a for loop was, but like a year later, they're building out these things that myself with 15 years of engineering experience could probably not have built in months of work without AI. Like it's just incredible what they're able to build.
Totally.
So, and of course, extremely exciting. And then myself coming from a technical background. So a bit before joining the Kiln, I was a technical co-founder at a startup, ran that for a couple of years with one of my best friends out of university, exited that in 2024, and then spent a bit of time doing freelance work in what I would then later learn was GTM engineering, and then kind of like actually joined the Kiln first as a GTM engineer, then their first head of GTM engineering, did a quick stunt as head of education to help out on the side with 2X, and now just like okay, back to the engineering side and special projects. But so what I still find is interesting is that I'm super happy that the pie is expanding. But with that said, I still think it's the true engineering side is underexplored. That's all I'm saying. Like that's a bit weird that we're that few actual engineers building on Vercel, which was like very interesting to me. That when I was looking around at these, like which is the solution if I'm gonna. If I were at a startup, at a company, what would be my stack if I was going to do like proper engineering for the GTM side of the business? If I were to deliver something to a client and deploy it to them, like how could I pitch that without saying you should get these 20 different subscriptions all dispersed, and like how do they keep track? And then I just like, hang on, I know the answer. I've been building on Vercel for years. You can have one subscription, and then like through the marketplace you can just like get more things, and it's on the same bill, which is an insane important thing when it comes to like the logistics of an engagement with a client or for your own company. With that said, and then that you can just be like, oh, I need to run these, I need a database. Well, Supabase is a pretty obvious choice. Might look into Neon, but Supabase is pretty neat because you have storage as well. Oh, I want to run Clay-esque like queues and long-running jobs to do enrichments and waterfalls. Well, you have Ingest right there, or even Vercel workflows, and it's like everything is just there. And when you look at it and you actually write the code, it's actually not that complex code. It's usually like a few loops and like maybe a call to the like AI SDK and stuff. It's like compared to like if you tell now today Fable 5 to like build me, this like incredible piece of engineering, this whole web app, and then it goes away for hours. What we're talking about in terms of like workflows and stuff, it's quite trivial actually, but there's just so much you can do. You can help with meeting prep, CRM cleaning, prospecting. Like there's so much to do, but not much of it is that deep in terms of like, again, like orchestrating all this auth and all this craziness, right? So I think it's very, very exciting to look here. And I just feel that I kind of want to shout like, why is no one looking over here? This seems like an incredible opportunity. So that's kind of where I'm standing, kind of like shouting with building open source projects, just like, one click deploy, like use this on Vercel, use this on Railway. Like, it's so easy actually to get started. So that's kind of my angle to it. It's just underexplored, even though I'm so happy that so much is happening over here, if that makes sense.
I think one thing I would double click into is like this whole cost thing. So I'll give you maybe a frame of reference because I feel like you have a lot more experience with like Clay, for example. So we've been doing some like work with a similar type of GTM engineering project where we are deploying to Vercel, and basically this is like an auto outbound play, right? So let's say in like the past 30 days, for example, this particular workflow on Vercel crunched through 15,000 contacts. Each contact I'm doing like a research step with Exa. We're calling our like Snowflake and our Salesforce to pull together data, and then we're calling the AI SDK, like you said, with Opus to generate an email and send it out. Something like that. I just ran like the usage for this project. Like how many dollars do we actually spend to run this in the past 3 days? And the amount was like $43. Like just like extremely low usage. I want to ask you the question, like for something similar to that, because I'm not really experienced with a lot of the no-code tools. Like, what would the costs be like for a similar type of deployment?
Yeah, so this I think it's fair to say that we just had one of the biggest shakeups in. I hope I'm using that term correctly. Like one of the most like seismic shifts in the GTM engineering community a few months back when Clay changed their pricing model. So the really interesting thing here was that before a few months back, in the olden days of February 2026, then you only had to pay credits for enrichments inside of Clay. So like, oh, I'm going to use a data provider to find an email, then I pay for it, and that like everybody would say this makes sense. I can bring my own API key if I have it. Everybody happy in general. Like, and then you might complain about the markups a little bit, but in general, like for agencies especially, like everybody happy, except for, as it turns out, Kiln, because what was happening in the background was that some of us were. I don't know, for example, if you've heard about Eric Novoslavsky. So it's this guy behind Growth Engine X. He is absolutely fantastic guy. Shares a bunch of amazing content on YouTube. But so I believe this is correct, that he was their biggest user on Clay, but he was essentially on a plan that was like, $300 because he was just using the HTTP API, which cost nothing because that you can use as much as you want. So he and others were using it to run millions of actions a month. And so, of course, Clay looked at, so very similar to Vercel, like if you pick your own API keys, if you do your own thing, you could call the AI SDK that way, like everything. And then it might cost you just like a few $100s a month and you have this really dope tool. But Clay said, at the end of the day, I'm sure like they are valued at $5 billion. They have to go into the enterprise. They can't cater to these like hacky agencies that, to some degree, essentially like exploit like what's going on. I'm guessing that they definitely run a deficit on those guys. But so now they introduced action credits, and not only like to avoid, like they didn't set the cap at like 400,000. They were like I believe for around $500, you get like 40,000 a month. And that's like, 40,000 actions. Wait a minute. If I run a couple of thousand people through an email waterfall that has 5 enrichment providers and then like a validator after each, that could theoretically get me, past half of my month in like one run of a couple of, like, all this math blew up of like how at the scale at how these, a lot of these agencies and smaller companies were working. So at that point, it was very interesting because I think it's very clear Clay has an amazing future in the enterprise. Like they have infinite money. They care more about stuff just working. When the guy that built it and the guy after him left and was replaced by someone else, they have to take something over. It's more important that it is a tool, that everything is robust and it just works, and they have somebody to call if something goes wrong and all that stuff. But for a lot of agencies that are very like entrepreneurial and hacky, they were like, I can't build a business this way anymore. There was this Cambrian explosion of our alternatives, very much centered around Claude Code. And so then they took what seems to be 2 main approaches, or rather, almost everyone is taking one approach, and then I actually prefer another one. And that is that there were all of these tools where maybe DeepLine, I don't know if you heard about this tool, it's probably one of the most popular at the moment, where it's it at least started as a CLI so that it can do waterfalls. It comes with all these providers. You pay for it just like you do for Clay, so to speak. You get like 80 providers in that one subscription. And then you can say to Claude Code, oh, hey, build this outbound list and like do this waterfalls. And it just does it. And there is no interface. It's headless. And it's pretty magical when you don't have to point and click anymore. So that sort of stuff happened. But I think that most people are now looking into just like, how do I make Claude Code like do the work for me? But what I think is that we need to move one layer up, and that is to use Claude Code to build systems that we put somewhere, like Vercel, so that like when otherwise, like, should I tell a client like, hey, you guys, like your GTM motion, it will run on my Claude subscription. No, that won't work. Or should I say like to the CRO, give me your subscription, it will run on your, like it doesn't work. But if I say, just like if I were a software engineer and I would build an app for you to use, and then it's like we deploy it here and here's how it works, we can do the same for GTM engineering. And we build an actual system that can do 15,000, or whatever, however many thousand outbound for $43. Like your baseline is my goal. If that, like, that this is where I think things are moving, what you guys are already naturally doing, because that's where you are. But I think we all need to move where you are. So that's kind of my true goal at the moment. But so that's awesome. Kind of my perspective on things. Would love to hear, like, if you call me out, I'm missing something, or your thoughts, would be super interested to hear.
No, I mean, I agree. I think like we definitely see that at Vercel, where, obviously like we on the GTM engineering team at Vercel, like we have so many things that are just workflows. Like we're just dogfooding our own workflow product, and it's great. Like it's amazing. It scales pretty much infinitely, right? Like we never have to worry about the scale. I think that there's, like you said, like a broader interest in people doing that as an industry. I remember this was many years ago, but in a past company, there were like all these workflow tools that the company used, like Zapier, N8N, right? Like these ones that someone could just spin up, and it was all like a lot of like operations work. And people would spin up these workflows, and then they would scale to hitting these limits where we were literally paying like Zapier like $30,000 a month, and we were a small company, and it was just ridiculous. Like we couldn't just, that wasn't scalable. So we had to, like, on the engineering side, take those workflows and then translate them into, at the time we were doing like Lambda functions and Lambda step functions, which was like kind of a pain, but it was, better than building those out in Zapier and paying like a massive bill. So then we kind of took this approach where then like the ops team would build out workflows, and if they scaled to a certain point, then as an engineering team, we would take those and then like move those into code. But now like the cost of code is basically free, right? Like if you just use Claude to build that system, then you're able to build something that can scale and be so much cheaper. Like when we did Lambda, we were running all of that on like a free plan of Lambda. Like we already had an AWS bill, but like it was all included in our, literally like our free Lambda usage. So we took like, $25,000 a month down to basically like $10 in usage cost. And I think it's the same thing that we're seeing with workflows. Like these workflows that are running massive workloads can cost you like, maybe $100 a month, and you're able to spin them up so fast. So I think I totally agree. And I think that like one other thing I'll say, and I know Aman has thoughts on this, so I'll let him speak, but I think like another thing that I think I'm seeing is that people do think about, especially maybe if they're coming from a non-technical role, their first thought is, how do I use Claude to do this? And so it's like using Claude to do the task, to do the actual workflow. But I think you're right that I think the right approach is to not say like, how can I get Claude to do this? It's how can I get Claude to help me build a system? Because I think like determinism in a system is also a good thing. With a lot of these, especially like a lead enrichment, like waterfall system, right? Like you don't need Claude doing a different thing 9 out of 10 times. Like you need it to do the same. You need something that's going to be repeatable, so you can have traces, see when it fails, see when something goes wrong, or have an audit log for like compliance reasons. And I think that workflows are just like the way to do that, to build it using, Vercel workflow is amazing. Like I would use that, but yeah, build it with like ingest or whatever other tool you're using to just make it repeatable.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'll call it is like maybe before AI, that gap of like $30,000 for Zapier versus like $10 for AWS, is that gap is kind of filled with like you gotta have an engineer, and engineers are like very expensive. But now the equation has totally changed because you have an AI tool. And actually, I think now, like for example, a friend of mine just like hopped into a new job, and in this job, they actually built it in Microsoft Power Apps, which I don't know if anyone has heard of before.
Very heard of that.
Let's go.
Is it like VBA?
No, dude, it's kind of like that. It's basically like Microsoft's like no code tool for like Microsoft apps or whatever. I don't know. It's niche, but he's running into the same problem of like he's got to like read this like basically this like picture and try to understand like what's happening in this picture to make stuff happen. And like how much easier would it be if that was just like in JSON? And then you have to read the JSON. You can just point Claude at it and be like, hey, tell me what's happening, unwind what's going on here for me so like understand it. And now if you have these tools, like you can get kind of best of both worlds. You can get that like less than $100, usage price for whatever workload you're running, and a very easy system that the next guy can go just like run Claude Code and be like, what the hell's happening here? And then like have the breakdown of what the workflow steps are. So I mean, Elias, I think that you kind of agree with kind of that direction, right? I think it makes a lot of sense to me.
Totally. I mean, at the end of the day, if what these models tend to just be best at is code, and then like we can just like, yeah, you can have this other system and try to give them these like small open windows into what's going on there, or you just give them the code and like it can do anything for you. And again, like what we tend to be doing is actually so relatively trivial, and everything from the code itself to again like the hilarity of the pricing in terms of like you sign up for Supabase and they're like, okay, so we're gonna get you ready for millions of users, and just like, bro, I'm just like gonna enrich a couple of thousand, dude, is fine. And that is like free, or like a couple of dollars, like, and they're like, what are you doing? And it's like, no, it's eternal use, like it's virtually nothing. Like at the end of the day, like that, you sit in like the Taj Mahal and you're just like at the front door having your coffee. It's like, dude, it's fine, I'm good. Like it's they're so underutilized, these tools for like internal use, and instead you pay these massive bills, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars per tool, and then they don't even do what you want. Like, oh my god, like again, super understandable, and they certainly have their place, but again, underexplored to do more of this is what I keep coming back to.
Yeah, I'm curious what you guys think on like the flip side of this, where like, because I think the value in the example I gave earlier of using like a no code tool could be like, it's the barrier of entry is just really low. And of course, like with these code first tools, or just, I guess, just code itself, like the barrier of entry was like the knowledge gap, but now that's kind of shrunk over time with AI. I do think there's probably still like some value in some of these no code tools. I think like iteration velocity for someone that's non-technical, and maybe like maybe that's still up there. I think also like the ability for someone to kind of grok like a visual workflow is like a lot easier than like people like us that are just we've just stared at a terminal in Tmux windows for years of our lives, and so it's like no big deal for us. I'm curious if you guys think if there's like any other benefits. I think they definitely exist, and like markets prove that, right? Like these companies are very successful and they've done very well for themselves, and like I would never expect someone that's never touched code in their life to like begin to understand even how to set up Claude Code. So like I'm curious what you guys think on that, if there's any other benefits you can think of.
I think the biggest thing is like, like when I'm thinking of like, if I need to set up a new workflow, it's very easy and intuitive for me to be like, okay, I create the workflow, then I want to create a UI so I can like create observability for myself, and then I want in that UI some like button to like test the workflow works, makes sense. And those are like assumptions that I have, but like I think the blank page problem like is like kind of crazy when you're trying to do no code or like fully coded, right, solutions.
Yeah.
Because you don't have any of those assumptions or frame of reference, like that I need to have a UI or like a testing thing. Like how many times Cam have you like spun up a thing and it's like just stub out the data providers and just like test that everything works, because like you just want to see everything go through. That type of instinct is just not there. But like that blank page problem is still there in the no code solutions, but it's at least like you still have like something of a starting point, right, to kind of click buttons to get going.
Totally. And like one thing that also I think is very useful to remember is that like even as a stepping stone, I think that these like no code and low code solution have a great place. So for example, for years I was trying to get my co-founder, who's an extremely smart guy, but he's not like technical in the sense of like he's not a programmer, and so I just like, how do I get him to learn how to code? And I, try like, dude, this like code.org, it's amazing. Like it's 20 hours, you'll do it in 5. It's fine. It'll be amazing. But nothing really stuck. But then I got him into Zapier. And then he was like, again, all of this creativity of his, like all these really smart ideas that he had, suddenly he had a medium to do it. And he's like, oh, I can do these crazy things. And then it was so cool to be able to say, everything you just learned, like an integration is an API that looks like this in text. And here is, here's a flow and perhaps like a loop. Now, you can approach it like this. And then suddenly, like, then when a few years ago, I got him into Replit. And then he's like, oh, like I got it. I need an API key and I need to find the documentation where it says so and so. And then it was just like doing Zapier in Replit. And then we graduated him to Claude Code on Vercel. And now he's just like building there like crazy. He has never, to my knowledge, taken any formal education in not in school and not like a course in any fashion. He has just been coding with agents, and he's now deploying dozens and dozens of projects on Vercel by himself, like running, like nobody's stopping him, and so it would have been extremely difficult to it was extremely difficult to try to get him to like even close to, and of course, like I tried to pad the room like this. Like I wasn't just saying like, oh, let's start with C. Here's, buffer overflow. Like, I tried really hard to make it fun and interesting. It wasn't good enough. But when you start with something that can bring him value in his day to day, and then he gets the right types of thinking, and then he can get ready to graduate, that is still awesome. And on my end, I have learned so much about the use cases of GTM engineering through using Clay, that I'm like, oh, data providers is a huge thing. Looking at, we need block lists, we need lookups. Oh, there's this really like CRM cleaning is this huge mess. And so even if I now am interested in approaching that with code, I have all of that backbone of like, I was using this no and low code tool, but it was still immensely helpful. So it's not like all of this is a waste unless you do this. It's still so useful, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's more nuance than it's just like a binary, like it's, good or bad. And that's a really cool story. I mean, I think we've all experienced that. Like even in my own coding journey, I remember like getting intimidated at certain points because, you would get to a level and then all of a sudden you realize there's a new mountain to climb. And then you like are not ready to climb that mountain until you've, done some other thing. Right. And so, yeah, I think that no code tools do a great job of bridging that gap. I think too, like it's maybe a good abstraction is something visual so that you can help someone that thinks differently about an issue, like solve that, like in the case of maybe Zapier and 8in, it's like a visual way of doing things. And I think this goes back to like my own personal opinion. I think that like having some sort of abstraction like that is good. And then the perfect solution is then to translate that into something like code that anybody can access, or an abstraction like code that an LLM can grok easier and understand easier. Like I think there is like the best of both worlds that you can have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's super nice that Vercel has a UI for some things. Like, it's a coding platform, but I still sign into a dashboard and like I have my point and click. Like some things are super nice to have a UI. So, I mean, it's also a mixed model everywhere to some degree. But of course, just like the amazing experience of course, of like hooking up a Vercel CLI to then have the agent like check, like, is the env vars correct? Is this correct? Like, oh my God, it's such a drag to do it with the UI, no matter what product it is. So that's super cool. But yeah, it's yeah, it's a very interesting sliding scale. Where is the future? It's a mix. It's all messy, and you know, this paradox that even though like code is making a comeback, Claude is making a comeback, no code tools are still like going like this, like most of them. You know, like you know, the death of Clay has been whatever the saying is, like was certainly premature. Like again, like that might be the feeling of an agency owner, but then they're growing like this because the enterprise works completely differently, and that's a massive market. And oh my god, it's so complex
Yes.
to just like understand where something is going. You know, as a coder, you're like, you know, I might not understand the true vibe coding tools. You're like, who uses base 44? What is this? And then it's like $150 million there. And you're like, what is happening? But it's still, you know, so I keep being wrong about my predictions just again and again. Like I have, you know, such a bad, you know, ability to predict how things will go.
Same. Yeah. Never listen to my financial advice for the stock market. It's a warning. Yeah, I think that's great. Maybe some like kind of closing thoughts here as we kind of wrap up. But I think like I think you're totally right. I think that there's so much value in these like code first solutions. I think that there's still some value in these no code solutions. And you know, speaking of the market perspective, I think that this whole like SaaS apocalypse, personally, I think that it's been overblown. Like you said, like there's just been insane growth for all these companies. Like I know that at our own experience, Amon and I at Vercel, like, you know, we're never going to build our own Snowflake, right? Or like building a Salesforce is like such a big undertaking. Like you always need some sort of like underlying backbone to that. And I think that a lot of these tools provide that. And in some of the cases, like you mentioned, I think Clay provides that for some people where they're using it as like a backend. So I think like these things will always exist, and AI is just accelerating kind of all of those things.
Totally.
Yeah. Any other closing thoughts you guys might have before we wrap up? Thanks again, Elias, for being on here. We really appreciate it.
No, my absolute pleasure. You know, again, if there is one other thing, I would just you know, be super interested to hear if there's any viewer / listener out there that's building open source. I think that so coding is one thing, but it's also it's very interesting. When I started to build some open source stuff, some people got in touch with me and were like, dude, like it's not gonna work. And I'm like, okay, so that's super interesting. Why? And they're like, you know, at the end of the day, GTM is a zero-sum game. Who would ever want to share what they've got? Like, it's a very interesting thing as a developer. You're like, mine does not compute. Like, it's just like, obviously, if we share this and we build on this together, it's good for all of us. The pie is growing. But I think that it could be like a mix of like, there is so relatively small amounts of engineers in GTM, so that, you know, of course, less people are building stuff that tends to end up as open source projects on GitHub. But I do think there is perhaps some truth to that as well. Like, that's not maybe as common of a growth engine of like, you know, we've built this open source project and now like everybody is using this way of outbound. Maybe you would rather kind of like keep that to yourself. But I still want to give it a go. And like, so I think that again, like who else but Vercel to lead the path there with all of this, like really, really amazing, like open source builds that you're sharing. So anybody that is building something, I would like encourage you to like share more of it. I think it's a super, super small community. So like if somebody makes a post, we will all see it like immediately. Like the algorithm would be like, these are the 3 dudes that really care about it. And then it will like light up our feed. So I would be super stoked if more people were like building in public, open source and stuff. That would be dope.
So I guess on that, Elias, where can people find you?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So honestly, for some reason, LinkedIn tends to be where most people in GTM are. So LinkedIn, Elias Stravik is his path. If you more want the like group chatty version of me, it's on Twitter /X, again, Elias Stravik. Otherwise, GitHub at Elias Stravik, if you want to look into anything I've been building. I guess those other places, super, super fun to connect with everybody. Again, we're a small community, so it feels like we're almost like travelers and like recognizing like, oh man, I've seen you. Oh man, we need to talk. So I very much feel like that, in this conversation as well. Like I've seen you guys around, listen to the podcast. So just so happy to have an excuse to reach out to you guys. And yeah, so happy to have gotten the honor to be here today.
No, likewise. Honor is all ours. And yeah, totally just digging into what you said. I agree. Like definitely, if anyone is listening and wants to kind of collaborate on open source things or has any input, yeah, like drop us all a line, and Elias, we'll put all your stuff in the description, all of your contact stuff, so that people can get in touch with you as well. But well, thanks again for being here. Thanks everyone for tuning in to Ship GTM podcast. I'm sure probably we'll have Elias again as a visitor.
Lovely.
If he doesn't mind, we love yapping away with him. It's been great.
All in.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here, and yeah, we'll see everyone next time.
Thanks.